yo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning and welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, don't mess with cats. We meet a self-described kitty CSI team devoted to investigating possible cases of animal cruelty. Then, a new poll asks Florida residents who they want to be their next U.S. senator, as well as views on affordability, ICE crackdowns, and the need for AI regulation. And artistic inspiration from both humans and all that they leave behind. We meet the man behind the latest Project Atrium exhibit at Mocha Jack's, artist Nari Ward. Join the conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937 or head to firstcoastconnect.org where you can find all the ways to connect with us. Stick around. We'll be back right after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. is winning in the attack on Iran. He spoke at the Pentagon last hour. He says the U.S. and Israeli attacks have devastated Iran's military.
They are toast, and they know it. Or at least, soon enough, they will know it.
The U.S. and Israel are continuing to strike Iranian targets. Hegseth says the U.S. was behind the overnight sinking of an Iranian naval ship off the coast of Sri Lanka. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, says the U.S. has enough weapons for offensive and defensive purposes. This comes as Iranian authorities say the attacks have killed more than 1,000 people in Iran. Iranian authorities had planned to launch 3 days of official mourning tonight for Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. He was killed Saturday in the first wave of attacks against Iran. Officials had told Iranians to attend the ceremonies in massive numbers, but Iran state media now says the mourning rituals will be postponed to another time. No new date has been set. There are results from some of yesterday's primary elections. In Texas, the Associated Press has called the Democratic primary for the U.S. Senate for Texas State Representative James Tallarico. He defeated Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. From the Texas newsroom, Blaise Gainey has more.
Tallarico took the stage right after midnight to let his supporters know that while every vote must be counted, he was confident in the outcome. That was before he was declared the winner. He used that time to drive home the reason he ran for the seat.
This is a people-powered movement to take on this broken, corrupt political system. This is truly a campaign of, by, and for the people.
Texas Democrats haven't won a statewide race in over 30 years, but polls show Tallarico could break that losing streak depending on who he faces in the primary. After he was officially awarded the Democratic spot, he sent out a press release saying, quote, "We're about to take back Texas." For NPR News, I'm Blaise Gainey.
Tallarico's Republican opponent has not yet been decided. The GOP contest will go to a runoff election in late May. It will be between incumbent Republican Senator John Cornyn and Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Their rivalry has been bitter. Paxton accuses Cornyn of being weak and beholden to outside interests.
We just sent a message loud and clear to Washington. We are not going to go quietly. And we are not going to let you buy the seat.
But Cornyn is pointing to Paxton's troubles. Paxton has faced a criminal indictment for alleged securities fraud, allegations of adultery. He was also impeached by the Texas State House. Paxton was acquitted by the Texas State Senate. This is NPR.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. The former Young Men's and Young Women's Leadership Academy at Eugene Butler Middle School is now known as the Jacksonville STEM Academy at Eugene Butler after the school board approved the new name last night. The name matches the school's Agri-Science Magnet offering, which replaced the former leadership program this school year. The school district made the change shortly after it removed Eugene Butler from the list of schools it plans to close to cut costs. Out-of-state and international students may soon find it harder to get into some of Florida's public universities. Tristan Wood reports the State House approved a bill to decrease the number of non-Floridians allowed in as freshmen at universities.
Currently, 90% of admitted freshman students must be Florida residents at the University of Florida, Florida State University, University of South Florida, the University of Central Florida, and Florida International University. These are schools the state has designated as the highest performing. Under the bill, the figure climbs to 95%. Bartow Republican Representative Jennifer Kincart Johnson says her bill isn't about lowering standards, but increasing the number of Floridians that stay and get an education in the state while taking advantage of the Bright Futures Scholarship. Miami Democratic Representative Ashley Gant opposes the change, saying it will hurt the institutions by limiting cross-cultural education.
And that includes being able to interact in a collegiate level and in an educational space with people from all across the world.
That bill language has not appeared in the Florida Senate, but several bills have moved forward that deal with higher education, so this policy could still pass this session. I'm Tristan Wood.
It's 61 degrees in downtown Jacksonville.
NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Luminescence Foundation. Luminescence Foundation is dedicated to shedding light on neurological research focused on Alzheimer's and Parkinson's diseases and supporting land conservation initiatives. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, cats face an array of hazards from vehicles to predators, even freezing temperatures. But they can also be deliberately targeted by humans. We meet the scientists behind a new investigative initiative to combat cruelty to free-roaming cats. Later in the program, what a new statewide poll tells us about the upcoming midterms. And the artist Neri Ward joins us to discuss his monumental exhibit at Mocha Jack's. But first, a University of Florida team likens itself to a kitty CSI, using science and evidence to track and ultimately prosecute cases of animal cruelty. Joining us via video to tell us about the program, A Cat Has No Name, we're joined by Dr. Adam Stern, professor of forensic pathology at University of Florida's Veterinary Forensic Sciences program. Dr. Stern, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
We're also joined by John Kim, assistant professor at the school's College of Veterinary Medicine. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for being here. Dr. Stern, we've spoken before. When you were on last, we were talking about a statewide task force that you were establishing here on the First Coast, one of 3 statewide. Tell us, though, how do cats, and particularly free-roaming cats, fit into the overall picture of animal abuse, animal welfare?
Yeah, sure. It's great to be back. I remember that meeting we had a year ago. So cats, the free-roaming cats, they unfortunately, they don't have a home, right? Their home is outdoors. And they come across a lot of issues, whether it is predators, vehicles, things of that nature. But unfortunately, there's also a more sinister thing that happens to them, where they do become victims of cruelty, simply because they're out there, and unfortunately some people just want to harm them, and so they just kind of fall into the realm of the voiceless, and we now look at them more objectively to figure out what's going on, why they're dying.
And so compared to other animals, whether we're talking about domesticated animals or farm animals, animals in the home, animals outside the home, how do cats rank generally when it comes to the perils that they face?
Well, the free-roaming cats, the perils that they face, they get hit by cars and get predated on by coyotes, other animals out there. But in the work that we've done, roughly 4% of the cats, the free-roaming cats, something more sinister does happen to them, where they are either injured from, say, an air gun, or they are poisoned intentionally. In many of those cases, there can be an accident along the way, or just simply sort of beat up because somebody didn't like them and came across them and hit them.
And so you, in your lab, you take animals that actually come from around the globe, but tell us how an animal, or a cat in this case, ends up in your lab.
Yeah, so for this A Cat Has No Name program, really the first step is for people to reach out to us. We have multiple ways they can call us, they email us. We have an online message system that they can use to just sort of reach out and start to say, hey, something's going on. For example, we had a case recently from Idaho where we were sent a number of deceased cats to figure out what was going on in their cat colony. And in that case, there was an intentional poisoning that did occur. We were able to figure it out in all of the cats and start to develop patterns that we worked with.
And so the cat has no a cat has no name. Tell us where the name for the program came from.
It started during the COVID era, and I was watching Game of Thrones, and I just kind of thought, A Cat Has No Name would be fitting. Now, some of these cats do have a name. We just don't know them because there might be a colony caretaker who knows them and knows that cat by a very specific name. But in many cases, we never know. And we still want to tell their story, and the name kind of just stuck with me.
And so you receive these deceased specimens, as we said, from around the country, around the world, and you have completed nearly 3,000 forensic autopsies in your work on animals, generally speaking. But what happens to your research? So take this case from Idaho, for instance. You receive these samples. You're able to determine, I suppose, with some toxicology testing that they've been poisoned. But what happens then to the evidence that you've collected?
Yeah, so in a case like that, where we find something that was, suspect malicious, we will report it to the authorities in that jurisdiction. And then their job is going to be to go out and investigate and ask more questions. We're here in Gainesville, Florida. They're up in Idaho or in Wisconsin. And so we're not doing the boots on the ground investigation. We're telling them one part of the story, which is the animal. But we give them all the evidence that they need to now start to go ask more questions, go look for potential witnesses, evidence at the scene, all of those things. But the ultimate goal is to give a voice to the voiceless, and then give the investigators, give the attorneys the information they need to investigate. And if they find someone who's culpable, prosecute.
Do your findings in the lab inform what they might be looking for? For instance, do you guide them based on what you've discovered in your research?
Yes. So it's going to guide them a lot. Sometimes it guides them as really there is no investigation that needs to be had, simply because it's a natural disease process. It's a predator. But those cases where we say, hey, that animal died from being shot with an air gun pellet, that is going to now give them information to go find people. Look where that cat was found. Is there surveillance cameras? Everybody has some sort of Ring camera, Nest camera on their homes. Buildings have cameras all over the place. And so they're going to have to go and do their investigation. But we're giving them the ability to say, hey, you know what? There is a suspicious event here. There's a potential crime. Let's look more.
All right. I want to talk a little bit more about the process, but I want to bring John Kim into the conversation. So your background is into research, your oncology. I mean, you look at cancer, you diagnose cancer specifically in canines, but you're also doing a lot of AI integration at the university and helping to build out the school's AI program. So can you tell us how you fit into this cat research and the work that you're doing together with Dr. Stern?
Yeah, that's very important question, and actually interesting question, right? Actually, I think this really started with my backgrounds, both educational and cultural. Becoming veterinarian was always my dream when I was young. Although I'm doing the research and I'm not a veterinary clinician now, I really care about animals, and but also I care about the people who love and care for them. So that's a big part of why I pursued my training in veterinary pathology and doing research, including cancer research, so I could help both animals and humans by better understanding of disease, especially for my most of my career in cancer research. But I've always been interested in how truly people care about animals for many different reasons. But caring is just one thing. Dealing with the reality can be much more complicated. Many of these situations are not simple, like cancer research. They involve complex circumstances that need careful investigation and comprehensive answers. As a scientist, I'm always asking myself, how can science help people navigate this difficult situation? That's my philosophy and principle. When a free roaming cat dies, someone notices, someone cares, but figuring out what exactly happened, that's incredibly complicated because you're dealing with a lot of data, including pathology, imaging, toxicology, etc. That's what Dr. Adam Stern is doing. And when I saw how much data was involved in his work, something just clicked for me. This is exactly the kind of problem where AI can help, not to replace the experts, but to support them. It can help organize complex information and spot patterns that might otherwise be missed. So when I joined the University of Florida through the AI initiative, I learned about Adam's work and his outstanding veterinary forensic science program. He had already built this incredibly rigorous system with a large number of investigation cases involving free roaming cats. From my side, I was thinking about how AI could help manage and analyze complex biomedical data, and it felt like a very natural fit. We were really asking the same question, just from different angles. That's how the collaboration started from my main cancer research area.
And so where is the project right now? Can you show us or walk us through how it may be used, or perhaps how it has been used to sort through data or to come to some conclusions about how an animal ended up dying?
That's important question and great question. But actually, this project is at the very early stage because we just started the collaborative research and data manipulation, data pre-processing, and collecting cases requires a lot of energy and substantial amount of the time. So for now, to be honest, we don't have a conclusive data and results, but we are working on making some significant progress in helping diagnosing and determining the death of the free roaming cats.
So understanding that this is at the early stages, how might it be used if you were to envision sort of when all of the data is inputted and aggregated? How might it be helpful? What could it do for researchers or investigators?
So the main focus for us is to develop the more standardized and evidence-based approaches to investigating animal death. This not only improves animal welfare, but also builds a trust within the community by providing the evidence-based information, not just guessing or providing subjective manners. Dr. Adam Stern is doing a really great job, and he's a renowned expert in this field, but he's not everywhere, and he cannot do everything. So we wanted to create very supportive of tools of using AI for his work and for the people who are interested in this field.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to two animal cruelty researchers at the University of Florida whose work has focused on the abuse of free-roaming cats. If you have a question or a comment, you can join us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find out how to connect with us via email or social. Dr. Stern, to John Kim's point, you can't be everywhere all at once. This is a large-scale issue and problem. What is your capacity? I mean, you say, ideally people will reach out through one of the portals that you have available to get in contact if they have concerns or suspicions about mistreatment. But there must be a limit as to how many cases you can tackle. And how do you choose?
Yes, quite honestly, there is a endless amount of cases, and I can't be everywhere every day. So the way we choose, we kind of have to prioritize things. What evidence do we have? What's available to us to even get to us? Because people have to ship things from across the country to us, or it could be around the corner from the College of Veterinary Medicine. So with this work, I would love to see how this work can become a huge screening tool for us as we input more and more data, looking for certain data points that might say, hey, this case, there's some red flags here, and we should be looking at this one in a little more detail, and say the other ones that the red flags don't pop up, more as a screening tool. We can try to identify someone else closer to that person potentially, to sort of do the work for us, and then share it with us, and then we can kind of help them with their interpretations and things of that nature. But really looking for the artificial intelligence to be more of a supporting role than a replacement role.
I don't know if you're familiar or maybe recall, but there was a really high profile case here in Jacksonville just a couple of years ago in the Springfield neighborhood of Jacksonville, where cats were found to be missing in large numbers. And the community sort of began to realize and to review its Ring camera. And there was some video of a man who was taking these cats. He ultimately ended up being charged with felony animal cruelty, a couple of counts. But this was a community that estimates they lost between 20 and 30 cats that they cared for or were their own cats. What do we know about, just first of all, these patterns of behavior? Is it true that someone who is abusing animals is doing it more often or more frequently than in just an isolated case?
I think you really have to cross the spectrum. There are going to be isolated cases where it's sort of a one and done, and then you will have a person where they truly are, I don't want to say a serial killer of cats, but really that's what it comes down to, is somebody who will intentionally harm different cats over and over and over. And there's examples across the way. The other big thing that you have to think about, not only the animals, is that relationship to all other kinds of interpersonal violence, whether it's child abuse, elder abuse, spousal abuse, domestic violence. So even identifying somebody who hurts a single cat, you might find that they're actually also harming other individuals. So we sort of make those connections.
In this case, the community really rallied, as I said, and united. Social media was a big tool. There was a lot of posts and images and sketches of the suspect on Facebook. And there was a lot of pressure that built on local law enforcement to do something. How present is that when, I don't want to downplay it, but I mean, if a cat is found dead or a couple cats go missing, is there generally a great deal of urgency in a very busy law enforcement city to tackle that?
So the answer is there's urgency to look at that case. And that's where our A Cat Has No Name program really comes in, because we all know that everything gets ranked on, severity, how bad is the situation. And quite honestly, a lot of these large scale cat deaths where you might have a colony that loses 50% of the cats, as unfortunate as it is, it can be entirely natural. You get some diseases and they run through a colony and they decimate the colony, yet there is no human involvement. So what we're trying to do is sort of identify that very early on, so that way law enforcement, animal control, animal services, who might not have all the resources to do that aspect of the investigation, we do it for them, and then we say, hey, yes, you have a problem, or no, you don't, and it's entirely natural. So the program itself is designed to sort of, again, help other groups, the cats for sure, but then also the public, the investigating agencies. It really helps a lot of different aspects of the community as a whole.
And you talked about how people who commit this kind of violence could be involved in other kinds of violence. But do we know anything about their profile? I mean, court records in this particular case in Jacksonville show that this suspect was related to a veterinarian. Is there any indication in terms of predisposition or exposure that might play into somebody's behavior when it comes to animal abuse?
Yeah, there is. If you dig into their backgrounds, you might find that they, maybe it's someone in their 20s, and maybe when they were younger, they observed things that were done to animals where now they think it's okay. You can also find, with certain toxins, you start to think about, well, this person has a really good understanding because that is a unique poison that they use to kill these cats. So you can definitely start to look at their backgrounds. We do research looking at different aspects of society that might be risk factors for committing crimes against animals. So there is so much out there that we've already answered, but there's a ton more that we really still have to delve into and look at the social aspects of these individuals.
John Kim, I want to ask you because you are from South Korea. This is a country that has a lot of roaming cats as well. I saw a figure in some of the University of Florida data that said it was about 700,000 free roaming cats as of the early 2020s. How is the program that you're involved in now something that you think could, even in other countries, help process or deal with what can be a large population that can be really just overwhelming for people who are on the enforcement side?
Yeah, that's why we are using AI. The main reason I started working with them is that actually I was born and raised in that country, South Korea, and I still have my family and friends and veterinary colleagues there. Some of them work in the government veterinary laboratories under that Animal and Plant Quarantine Agency, which is the leading veterinary authority in the country. So as you mentioned, there has been a growing number of free roaming cats, and as a result, there is an increasing number of death cases that require veterinary forensic investigation. And we had the opportunity to connect Dr. Adam Stone with my colleagues in South Korea to discuss building an international research collaboration and scholar exchange program. Everyone immediately saw how meaningful and fascinating the project could be. And then we have technologies, but this technology has not been applied for this area. So there is a growing social issue by living with the cats by sharing the people's landscape and their spaces. So there is a big debate and controversial conversation and issues. So we are using maximizing the applicability of the new technologies for helping them in this specific area.
Well, it's an exciting project, and I'm looking forward to getting an update when more of it is up and running. The program is called A Cat Has No Name. It's operated out of the University of Florida. Dr. Adam Stern, Dr. John Kim, thank you both so much for joining us this morning and telling us about it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having us.
All right. Up next, what new poll results can tell us about the coming midterm election cycle. Welcome back. The latest poll from the University of North Florida's Public Opinion Research Lab asked Florida residents about the state's affordability crisis, ICE crackdowns, and who they want for their next U.S. senator. Here to tell us about it is Sean Frieder, Assistant Professor of Political Science at the University of North Florida and Director of the school's Public Opinion Research Lab. Sean, welcome back.
Always good to be here.
So the upshot here, I believe you said, is that it's clear that Republicans still enjoy an advantage in Florida, but it may not be as strong as previous years. Explain to us what the data show you that tell you that.
So first, looking at head-to-heads in the gubernatorial matchups and also the Senate matchups, we asked about Byron Donalds, who's in our previous poll the leading candidate on the Republican side to make it through their primary, and head-to-heads against the two Democrats there. And then we asked the same thing for Moody, the leading Republican, to come out of that primary.
Ashley Moody.
Yes, and the two Democrats there. And we found that the Republicans in both cases have about a 6 or 7 point lead over the Democrats. Now, that's a meaningful lead, but at the same time, that's not the seismic leads that we've seen in previous years. This is not a 15 or 20 point victory that we're looking at. We're looking more at high single digits. So that's maybe something that you would expect, one, in a midterm year. Midterm years for the party of the current president are usually much tougher than other types of elections. That's also probably somewhat a reflection of Trump's numbers generally, what's been going on in various policy areas. So combination of substantive things going on that kind of affect down ballot issues, but also just it's a tough environment for Republicans, just as it would have been for Democrats back in 22.
In terms of Trump's numbers here, President Trump had a 45% favorability, 48% unfavorable. But when his name was thrown into the mix in terms of who people support for governor, he really had an impact. You mentioned that you did a head-to-head kind of comparison about how Byron Donalds might fare in the gubernatorial race or how Casey DeSantis might fare. What happened when you told potential voters that Byron Donalds has Trump's endorsement?
Yeah, endorsements matter, especially in primary races. So if you don't mention to voters that there's an endorsement out there, Donalds is endorsed by Trump. We put DeSantis, Casey DeSantis, who's not announced that she's going to run. That's speculative, but we put her, she's otherwise been in the front runner conversation, up against Donalds. If you don't mention the endorsements, she's got about a 4 point disadvantage to Donalds. It's a pretty close race. You mention that Donalds has the endorsement, it becomes a blowout. She's down by about 35 points in that case. So endorsements make a huge difference. That makes it hard for her potentially to catch up because the other big endorsement potentially sitting out there would be Governor DeSantis' endorsement. Now, her being his wife, you would imagine that she would have the tacit endorsement. That would be an awkward conversation if she didn't get that. So with endorsement versus endorsement, Donalds has a pretty big advantage.
Yeah, your poll shows that DeSantis has fewer unfavorables than the president. He had a 52% favorable, 42% unfavorable. But you note that in the Trump favorability ratings that 57% of independents were in the unfavorable category. What does that tell you about positioning for congressional races in the midterms?
Yeah, independents in the state of Florida, this also looks similar to national numbers that we've seen elsewhere. They are frustrated right now. We see generally, if we look at net approvals, independents are down maybe negative 20, 25 on Trump on related issues. We asked a lot of questions related to immigration. If you mention Trump's name, that sort of insulates a little bit of their frustration. But if you just talk about ICE, if you talk about some of the things that have been going on recently, again, independents really frustrated. And when people go to vote, they often have national issues at top of mind, even if we're talking about Florida-centric races. So this is something that if I was in a House race, a Senate race, I would be really worried about what independents are thinking right now about national level issues.
And we did touch on the Senate race for U.S. Senate, which is Ashley Moody, who was appointed by the governor to the vacant seat that was left behind when Marco Rubio moved to work in the cabinet. So that is a special election, and she will face a couple of Democrats, both of whom are, have some name recognition, but not necessarily enormous name recognition. One of them is Alexander Vindman, who is our lieutenant colonel, and he was also a whistleblower in the Trump impeachment case that had to do with Trump's call to Volodymyr Zelensky back in 2019. And then Angie Nixon, who is a local House rep, and she served since 2020. What does your polling show in terms of how either of them fare against essentially the incumbent, Ashley Moody?
So at least at this stage of the race, there's not a huge difference or really any statistically detectable difference between their abilities to beat one of the Republican candidates. They do about as well as each other. There is some extra information that we find pretty interesting in there, which is just looking at name recognition. Pretty much when people vote in primaries, they lose the one thing they usually vote based off of, which is partisanship. So they go to the next thing, which is, have I heard this person before? Does this person seem familiar to me? Vindman's big advantage, theoretically, is that he's made national news in the past. As you mentioned, he was involved with Trump's first impeachment. He was the whistleblower in that case. So you would imagine that he would have a huge name recognition advantage over Nixon, who might be well known in Northeast Florida, but maybe not statewide. Instead, he's just got an advantage of about 8 points. So that's still also 8 points where most people are saying they don't know who Vindman is. Now, this is before campaign advertisements start going out and he starts being able to really press that advantage. But I guess if I was part of the Vindman campaign, I would be somewhat disappointed to learn that memories are short. People don't seem to be able to connect that name to what happened several years ago.
You mentioned enforcement when it comes to immigration issues, and the state, as reflected in this poll, is pretty well split. 49% disapproving of this administration's handling of immigration, 48% approving of it.
Now, if you just go and change one thing, which is instead of asking about Trump's handling, you talk about the specifics such as ICE's handling of immigration. And substantively, there's not a functional difference between those two things. As soon as Trump's name is taken out, a lot more people express disapproval. ICE, their handling is about -15. We ask a question about, would you be supportive or oppositional to bringing more facilities for detaining immigrants into Florida? That's even less popular at -18. So also in that, if you look at strong approval versus strong disapproval, there's a lot of strong opinions on this, but the strength is particularly on the strong disapproval side. The people that are unhappy are very unhappy about this.
Interesting. There are some issues that showed broad support, I thought was interesting in such a hyper-partisan time. You asked people about AI, you asked people about recall elections, and you asked people about guns. What were you finding in terms of how people are feeling about issues pertinent to those?
Yeah, I'll take recall and guns first. On those two, there's a pretty straightforward story. We asked if people would support the ability at the statewide level to recall people if they are failing in their job before the next election.
Elected officials.
Elected officials. Overwhelming support for that across the board, no partisan differences.
And explain to us, currently, you can recall at the local level.
At the local level, but no provision exists at the statewide level.
Okay.
And then when we talk about gun prohibition, specifically we're asking about prohibiting firearms at protests and demonstrations. Again, across the board support there, about 2/3 of Floridian support, but no real difference between Democrats, Republicans, and independents. Somewhat in line with often when we ask questions about specific policies, Republicans look a lot more positive than we ask more general questions. But I think this also has to do a lot with high-profile assassinations and attempted assassinations at protests and demonstrations, which might have brought everyone a little bit more in line. The question of AI is particularly fascinating because on one hand, there is a broad across-the-board support for AI regulation. One of the pieces of legislation running through the legislature right now would do things like require disclosure if you're talking to AI, some protections for children. So again, overwhelming across-the-board support. But the really interesting thing there is asking people just about how they feel about AI generally, not policy-related, just their attitudes. And we're seeing for the first time that I've been looking at this, a real partisan divide on this. Democrats about net -25. They're very skeptical right now of the rollout of AI. Republicans in the opposite direction, about +15, positive about the rollout of AI. And this is a partisan divide I wasn't seeing in these numbers even as recently as a year ago.
How about marijuana? We know that ballot initiative to make recreational marijuana failed in the last election cycle, but it was very close. The threshold in Florida for a ballot initiative to pass is 60%. And you found overall support for legalizing it at more than 60%.
That's correct. Yeah, 60 plus. I think 66% or so. So again, this is similar to what we saw the last time this was on the ballot. I've been fooled to a certain extent before and won't get fooled easily again. So numbers are high right now before campaigning starts. And then what we saw last time was that Governor DeSantis put quite a bit of money into an anti-marijuana campaign in the couple months leading up to the vote. That 66% we saw before trickled down slowly, and dropped right below 60% just as voting started. So the measure failed. You can imagine a similar thing happening if there is a similarly sized expenditure campaign on this.
So speaking of ballot initiatives, taxes is expected to be coming before voters at some point. There may be a special session to discuss what to put on the ballot for voters in terms of getting rid of property taxes or cutting property taxes or changing how their people are taxed. What are you finding in terms of support for those kinds of initiatives?
Yeah, so we use some ballot initiative language looking at phase out for the homestead taxes. And what we found was that's going to be right on the tipping point or so, about the 60% threshold that's needed for it to pass. We found the numbers currently sitting at about 56%. Republicans fairly supportive of this. It's a tax cut. 75%. Democrats deeply skeptical. It's something that goes to fund a lot of state and local services, so their support's at 25%. Independents, as they often do, are probably going to be the deciding factor here. They're right at 56%. So this is hovering just below the threshold level. This is going to be probably right on the edge of passage when we get to November.
Well, Sean Frieder, it is a fascinating early look at how this election season might roll out. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Absolutely.
And we'll have a link to those poll results on our website if you'd like to check them out. Up next, taking artistic inspiration from humans and all that they leave behind. We meet the man behind the latest Project Atrium exhibit at Mocha Jack's, artist Neri Ward. Welcome back. From the moment Neri Ward stepped into the New York art scene more than 3 decades ago, his work has been the source of fascination and acclaim. Using cast-off items and found objects, Ward transforms the mundane into haunting critiques of race, consumerism, and contemporary culture. His latest work is the latest Project Atrium installation at Mocha Jacksonville. Here to tell us about it is the artist himself, Neri Ward. Thanks so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
We're also joined by Mocha Senior Curator Ilva Rao. Ilva, nice to see you again.
The same.
So, Neri, your installation at Mocha Jacks is called Great Greetings. It opens tomorrow night. This is in Mocha's 40-foot atrium gallery. Tell us a little bit about the piece that you created and what you hope people see when they see it.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's important that the piece is also in dialogue with the sculpture class, Enlivened Space class. I wanted to find a project that would allow their input and their way of sort of exercising some influence on the work.
And these are UNF students,
yes.
The Enlivened Sculpture.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so it brought me back to a body of work that I did earlier with these emergency blankets. And because they were malleable, but also because they were materials that I felt, a material that I feel doesn't get stuck in one place. Like it's a material that is dealt with during crisis moments, but also material that is, post-marathon recovery. So there's a material of survival and a material it's also linked to this kind of slippage of being also associated with maybe even leisure or, some kind of time that you might have to control over your time.
And so, as you mentioned, this isn't the first time you've used these emergency blankets. You did a 2022 installation called Emergence Pool, which was in Milan, and it basically covered this, I think, 4,000 square meter swimming pool.
And it was in that case they were floating in the
Okay.
pool, and they were sort of covering the full length of the pool. And they also had dependents. There were these flags as well in that piece that I brought back into the dialogue. There's you don't see it on the image, but there is also a soundtrack, a sound component to the installation where I interviewed immigrants and they were talking about their memory of home. So there's
And part of this was coming as there was this really awful, fatal migration in many cases of people crossing the Mediterranean.
Exactly.
Sometimes they would survive and be greeted and given these blankets.
Yeah.
Many of them did not survive.
Yeah, and so that was the things to, and the pool is actually dedicated. The name of the pool was dedicated to a sort of fascist hero. It was still named after. It was a gold medal winner actually in World War II. He had died in World War II, but he's a gold medal winner, and so he is the namesake of the pool was still in place. And so I wanted to have a dialogue with that history, but also putting it onto this fragile plane of this water, this gold space, which is so much about a kind of instability, right?
Yeah.
The water itself.
And so for people who are watching our live stream, we will be showing some of the images that we're talking about. We are showing that pool image right now. So you talked about this it can be used in an emergency. Sometimes it's used post-marathon. A lot of people these days have started to associate those blankets with ICE detention facilities and the fact that they're often given to people who are being detained, families or whatever, to stay warm,
Right.
what can be very cold environs. Is that something that you were thinking about when you were creating this piece?
I think part of being an artist is you're engaging with the culture in general in terms of what resonates in the moment. But I'm also trying to push back other possibilities, place other possibilities into. So there was also sort of celebratory engagement that I wanted to merge that with, not to cancel that out, but like, how do we make sense of both of those realities at the same time?
Ilva, this exhibit, as all Project Atrium exhibits, has a confined space. The artist really has to find a way to work in that space. So how do you come to an understanding with the artist or an agreement about kind of what it might look like ultimately?
Well, I always say it's the closest that I as a curator get to being an artist when I work with artists for the Atrium, because it's such a unique space that it really challenges the artist, and oftentimes they can't come before they install. So you kind of have to translate how it feels like, and particularly in the case of Nari, that has to do so much with energy of the space. Of course, we have digital visuals these days, but it's not the same particularly because it's about the energy.
And this greetings, as you walk in, it is really the first thing that you see when you come into the museum.
Yeah.
And it's something that can be viewed from a variety of angles. So you can view it from the entrance, but you can also view it from the upper floors, and it changes the perspective a little bit.
Absolutely. And that's also a challenge to the artist, that usually we are confronted by the artwork frontally. But in the case of the Atrium, you can see it from above, you can see it from the side. So the artist has to think very three-dimensionally. So it's a unique challenge, isn't it, Nari?
Yeah, I think the other part of that component is really thinking about space and volume and the communal discourse, the idea that you're seeing it with other people, and that it's for me it was always about using that space as a part of the sculpture, as the sculpture in a sense. And so the blankets made a lot of sense, really for me, connected to this idea of how do you transform that space, but how do you create space for the viewer to be involved with each other.
And how was working with the students a condition of this exhibit? Is that something that you're told? How do you meet that challenge?
Well, it was kind of it was a good, Ilva hit me up at a good time. I had just retired from Hunter. So I'd been teaching for 30 years and I kind of I wanted to just focus on being in my studio. And it was a good time to sort of recenter that because I missed working with students. And so when she came and said, "Oh, this is an opportunity to work with students again," I was like, "Great, I'll be ready to do that." And so it was great because you get a range of input from them, and then there were some inputs that made sense for the project, and others that I would try to gently say, yeah, maybe conceptually it's not related.
We're going to have to take a short break. We'll be back in just a couple minutes. On the other side of this, we're talking to Ilva Rouse and Neri Ward. We'll be right back.
The Florida Theater presents Pat Metheny. The jazz guitarist, composer, and bandleader brings his Side Eye 3+ tour to Jacksonville on Tuesday, March 17th at 8 p.m. Tickets and information available at floridatheater.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com. Here Tomorrow provides no-cost, no-wait suicide prevention services in our community. The nonprofit will host its 5-year celebration, A Night of Promise, on March 21st. Tickets and information available at heretomorrow.org.
Dependable, intelligent, local. WJCT News 89.9, where Jacksonville turns for trusted news and insight every morning. Jacksonville Today is investigative reporting that breaks news, voter guides, answers to your Ask Jax Today questions, ideas for what to do this weekend, local history spotlights, and a daily piece of uplifting news. We call it the little bit of joy. It's all in the free Jacksonville Today morning email. Sign up at jaxtoday.org.
As part of its push to enforce a hardline immigration policy, the Trump administration signed deportation agreements with other countries that immigrants deported from the U.S. have no ties to. A judge recently ruled the practice illegal, but how many people has the administration already sent abroad? The third country deportation policy, next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I am talking to New York-based artist Neri Ward about his new project, Atrium Installment at MoCA Jacksonville. We're also talking to MoCA Jax senior curator Ilva Rouse as well. Neri, I want to ask you about some of the pieces that you are very well known for in the art world. Sure. And for folks who are watching our live stream, you'll be able to see these images. I want to start with one that dates back really to kind of your earliest work, Amazing Grace. Describe for us that's from the early 90s. Tell us what went into this installation, what elements you used, and where they came from.
Sure. Yeah, it's probably one of my largest installations. It was done while I was an artist in residence at a student museum in Harlem. And over the course of 4 months, I would go out every day and collect abandoned baby strollers from the street. And these are strollers that were used by homeless people or marginalized, collecting bottles and cans, and they would generally bring them to empty lots and sort out their cans. So they'd leave them there, and then they'd be picked up by sanitation. So I went in and picked those up. I wasn't snatching them from mothers. They're all discards. And so my goal was to collect 365, and I did that. And then the challenge was, what was I going to do? I didn't know what I was going to do with them. I just know that I needed to collect them, and then I'd find a story for them to tell through their accumulation. And so that's how I decided to create this boat form that they sort of are in the shape of. And then there's fire hose as well that incorporated into it.
Yards and yards of fire hose.
Yeah. I happen to live at my studio is across the street from a fire department. So there was always a connection with the firemen. And so when they had this material they were discarding, they asked me if I wanted it, and I started getting a lot of it from them. And for me, it was a material that I aligned with this idea of like salvation, because it's associated with fire, energy, but also water, right? It's very elemental materials. And so the idea of transformation that's connected with fire was really part of the piece as well.
And you do use audio in some of your exhibits. This one had a kind of a looping
Yeah.
Mahalia Jackson song.
Yeah, it's a song I grew up with. My father would always play Mahalia Jackson's Amazing Grace, and I remember what it made me feel, this sort of sense of hope and transformation. And in fact, when I was working on the piece, I started getting a little depressed and down because it was just these abandoned strollers in this dark space that I had initially rented to present it. And I needed something uplifting, and I thought, okay, that's what would do it. And it worked out well, because that piece, that song was actually written by a former slave trader, and it was his song about transformation.
And is that part of this boat imagery, kind of thinking about the Middle Passage? I mean, it is a very troubling piece to look at.
Yeah. The irony of that is, everybody comes and says, "Oh, you were talking about the Middle Passage," but in fact, I was talking about the womb. It was actually a vaginal shape that I was going for.
Interesting.
Which is great. I love when that happens. And it happens for me. That's always the exciting part of going on a journey, creative journey, where the work starts to tell you other things about your vision.
One piece that is also very compelling, particularly as kind of a commentary on contemporary culture, is called "Say Can You See?" It is an American flag that is hanging at red and white stripes, but when you get up on it, you realize that the white is actually all made of clothing security tags that are often affixed to prevent people from stealing. So it is tell us about the origin of that.
I've always wanted to figure out, for me, it's using these symbols that are very powerful, and figuring out how to transform them, how to, in some way, take the viewer on another kind of experience with that thing they think they know. And so the flag has always been like this holy grail of an object for me to think about how to transform. And so many artists have done great jobs with doing that, and doing it in a way, I wanted to do it in a way that was very respectful. And so it sort of turned me back on my early life as a security guard. So I had an intimate relationship to these security tags. And I knew that if I put enough of them on the flag, I could conceal the flag. And the idea of this thing, this object, symbol that gets in some ways overburdened with security, that you can no longer see what it represents anymore, was really a kind of backdrop to my logic in working with the piece. One other thing that I think is important is, for me, it's also that the flag isn't ruined, that in fact all those tags can come off and you would never know that they was there.
I do briefly want to talk about We the People, which is a well-known piece that you made. It's sort of woven shoelaces, but it kind of almost cast a shadow underneath the words. Tell us about that piece, and just briefly, because we got about a minute.
Yeah, so that was, again, another big statement of a text that people think they know but never really think about. So I wanted to find a way to enlarge it and find a way that the viewing of it becomes the experience. Because if you're standing close, not sure what you're reading, but then if you step back, you get it becomes more legible. And I think that aspect of your relationship to it, to the text itself, is sort of resonates with the meaning of the word.
Well, Project Atrium, it's Neri Ward's Great Greetings. It is unveiled tomorrow, March 5th. The exhibition runs through August 16th. The opening celebration tomorrow is free, and it runs from 8 to 9. Neri Ward, it is so nice to meet you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Ilva Rouse, thank you so much for being here.
Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.